Welcome to the Nebula Music Podcast, an interview series where I talk to some of today's most influential musicians, bands, artists, entrepreneurs, and basically anyone who's killing it in the music industry. Today I'm excited to be speaking with Cory Wong, one of the most phenomenal guitarists I have talked to in a long time, and I imagine a lot of you recognize him from his work with Vulfpeck. Anytime you hear that funky guitar style, you know it's Cory Wong playing. Normally, I would do an extended intro talking about his achievements and maybe even some of the work that he's currently working on. But we were having such a great conversation before the interview that I decided that it would be best just to transition into that interview. At the end of the episode, if you enjoyed the conversation, please subscribe to the podcast because I bring on the best musicians I can find. But trust me when I say I have lots of great musicians coming on this show, interviews that you definitely don't want to miss. So let's not waste any more time. Let's dive right in.
I hope to give you some good content here.
Oh,
it's my aim to give you great content for your podcast, for our fan bases to cross, and for the Venn diagram to expand more and more.
Yes. I love you, dude. Oh, fuck yes. Yes. Oh my God, dude. Honestly, and you know, before we even began, I just got to say, like, that performance you did with Pickup, that was fucking dope, man. Like the way you were playing,
that was a blast.
Yeah, like you guys just killed it. Like you guys didn't rehearse, did you guys, or just once?
No, I mean that was my first time meeting most of those people.
Wow.
Actually, everybody that I was playing with there, that was the first time that I had met them.
Wow.
So.
And you did a great job meeting them because you were just telling them where to go. I mean, I think it helps when everyone, you know, is a good musician so they can, you know, adapt to the changes. But still though, man, like I was just standing there like, man, like if these guys didn't rehearse, I've done that before where I've been flown in to play a random show, but you know, it's usually like pop stuff. So I have a backing track and you know, that sort of thing. But like to show up to a jam session and just be able to do all that and not mess up, like, you know, like that, I was I was impressed. I was just super impressed.
It was funny because I walked up and Sam was just like, hey, dude, at the end of this thing, I think we're going to do a jam. Would you mind like kind of leading the jam? Like, yeah, totally. Because, I mean, I've cut my teeth doing that. I've been playing with live bands for years. I've been a band leader for years. I've been a performer for years as a sideman. And now just more recently as like a frontman for my own thing.
Yeah.
But like when you know the audience is musicians too, there's a certain way that you can present it and like perform it that, I don't know, can just make it really fun. And I always try to, in my performances, try to like get the audience in on the joke and in on the music and whatever's happening. So it was fun to just be able to let it be loose, call it for what it was, and just have a great time. So I didn't know any of those people. No reason to rehearse, really, if I can just shout stuff out from the mic on where to go and what to do. And it's like this fun, nervous energy where it's like I was hearing Bianca's instincts and Billy's instincts and Carrie's instincts, you know, and like it was fun to just like, hey, guys, I'm Cory. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to start playing an E and you guys join in and we'll see where it goes from there or whatever, you know? And I love that because when you have musicians of that caliber around and musicians of that caliber in the room, we all hold ourselves to such a high standard that it's like, all right, let's deliver. Let's have fun.
Yeah.
And rather than like stressing over, oh, am I going to forget the form? Oh, what was that? What was that chord that we went to there? It was just like, no, let's just play and whatever, and we'll have a good time.
Yeah, you know what? I love that because it's weird because when you first start playing music, I feel like obviously that's kind of how it goes. You know, you start to learn to record and stuff, and then you sort of jam. Then as you start to go to school or at least get more professional, you tend to lose that a little bit sometimes. You know,
totally.
And then coming back to that almost seems like a surprise, but a very fresh welcome to me, at least. So I'm like, yeah, like this is exactly what I used to do when I was younger. And like now I haven't done this in a while, but like watching you guys do that, I was like, yes, like it kept me on my toes. And it was dope. It was just super dope, man.
Thank you, dude. Yeah,
awesome.
We had a good time and I'm always down for that sort of thing.
Yeah, man. I love talking to you, Cory. I mean, for those of you guys that are just joining in right now, normally what I do is I have like a quick little intro, where I like really like ecstatically introduce the guest, but I don't think Cory Wong needs any introduction. And we were just talking before this interview even started, and I just loved the way we were just going back and forth. So I decided just like, let's just jump in and just do this interview the way it is. Cory Wong, I'm very excited to have you on the show, man. How are you doing, man?
I'm great this morning. I have a cup of coffee in my hand, a microphone in front of my face, and headphones on, talking to you in my basement. This feels. I feel at home. I am literally at home. So of course,
yes.
I feel at
what
home.
Kind of coffee though?
I have a Bonanza Coffee Roasters Ethiopian roast that I made through a Chemex. I am a coffee guy at this point in my life. I don't know that I always will be. But I am a coffee guy at this point in the journey, and my favorite coffee shop in the world is in Berlin, Germany, Bonanza Coffee Roasters. I was just there, and I had the last of my beans is upstairs in my kitchen right now that I just made. So,
what are you going to get the rest imported? Because you're almost out.
Well, oddly enough, I do a coffee subscription service where I have different beans sent to me once a month. So I try coffees from different roasteries and that sort of thing.
Nice, anyways, man. I have my,
what a left turn from the music stuff when you just asked me, how are you doing today?
Well, I mean, okay, look, as musicians.
Let me talk about coffee really quick.
That's not a plug. You know, obviously we're not sponsored by that coffee shop.
Drink whatever coffee you like. If you like Folgers, drink coffee. That's fine.
Oh man, it's just interesting because I feel like as musicians, because of all the late nights and stuff that we have, I feel like coffee for the most part is part of a lot of musicians' life. I mean, I'm holding a Starbucks cup myself, so I'm not as super cool as you are. I definitely went for the more generic one, but I mean, it does the job for me.
It's all good, man. Some people drink Dasani, some people drink Aquafina, Fiji, Smart Water, whatever that 50-cent water is. You know, there's all kinds of stuff. You got your.
You do your thing. You do your thing. Well, I mean, you have your coffee. I have my coffee. It looks like we're both ready and awake. It's early in the morning for me out here in California. It's pretty early for you as well in Minnesota, which is where I believe, where you live now. I'm not sure if that's where you're from, but I love to get a chance to know you a little bit, Cory. A quick little backstory for you guys listeners. I actually met Cory, maybe 2 months ago before NAMM here in California where you were visiting. There was a pickup show for those of you guys who do not know, Pickup is a really amazing online community of musicians, and they have these shows. And I got a chance to watch you play Jam Out, which is what we were talking about earlier. You just sort of showed up. Sam Blakelock asked you to jump up and just lead the jam band, and you just killed it. And this is where I got a chance to meet you and talk to you. And I realized that I wanted to get a chance to know you better and have you on the show. And so I'm just excited to even get a chance to sit down, drink a cup of coffee, get to know you a little bit better. So Cory, I'm curious more a little bit about your backstory. Like, you're out in Minnesota. I just want to know a little bit more of like maybe like where you're from. If you are from Minnesota, maybe you moved from somewhere else. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I was born in upstate New York in Poughkeepsie. But basically, like when I started elementary school, we moved to Minnesota. And my family is from Minnesota. We were just living in New York. My family was living in New York for a handful of years because my dad had a job out there for a while. So I was born in New York, but grew up in Minneapolis. And that's where I'm from. That's what I would consider home, and it currently is home. I grew up around here, grew up playing music around here. Great town, great people, great arts community.
Yeah, I've always been curious about that. Like, how's the music scene out in Minnesota? Because look, I've been there once. I didn't really stay there very long, so I can't say I know the Minnesota or Minneapolis scene very well. But like in terms of like metropolises where the music scene is a big thing, like, LA, New York, Nashville, maybe even Atlanta a little bit, I never really hear of Minneapolis. You know what I mean? And maybe I'm just not as educated or as in the know as I should be. But I'm just curious, like from you, like how's the music scene in that area?
It's crazy. It's so good. It's awesome. I love the music here. So here's what I guess I'm not surprised that you haven't heard of it. And some people are like, oh, what do you mean you haven't heard of the Minneapolis music? It's like, yeah, it's just like, in some cases, it's kind of its own little bubble. But there are a lot of people that know Minneapolis musicians or have been through Minneapolis and have seen groups where it's like, oh, wow, the scene is amazing. The thing about the Minneapolis music scene is that it's an incredible local scene, and it's kind of a player's town. So there's a lot of really great musicians, really great music that's happening in Minneapolis, but it's not like a national industry town. You've got like in Nashville, there's a lot of great artists and musicians. LA, New York, like you're saying, there's a lot of great musicians, a lot of great talent, but there's also a lot of great industry stuff happening there. There's an infrastructure for a national artist to be based out of there. That infrastructure really isn't set up in Minneapolis, for better or worse. The bad side of it is there's not as many national artists, quote unquote, that are based out of Minneapolis, or if they are, they like kind of are also based out of other cities. Like I have a place that I rent in Nashville. Like I own a house in Minneapolis, but I also rent in Nashville because I'm there a lot recording and doing other things. And I spend a lot of time in LA. A lot of the bands that I work with do stuff in LA, or producers that I work with are based out of LA. So I live in Minnesota, but I don't really work in Minnesota a whole lot. Like at this point, I maybe do, I don't know, a handful of gigs a year in Minnesota. And then like I do a lot of remote recording sessions at my house or at studios where it's like, you know, an artist or a producer will send me songs and I'll record from my house and just send them the parts and blah, blah, blah. Anyways, the Minneapolis music scene, amazing players, not a whole lot of national artist infrastructure. That's the downside. But also the upside of that is there isn't the pressure of like, you need to do this sort of thing for your record so we can push a bunch of units. It's just like, no, this is the art that I want to make, and this is the music that I want to make, so I'm going to make it. And most of the decisions that are made musically are based on the art and the music side of it rather than the industry side of it. So on one hand, it's an amazing music scene because it's such an arts-driven and music-driven thing. On the other hand, it's just like, well, it's kind of hard to break through the national thing because the infrastructure isn't here. But it's 2018 right now, and the internet is alive and well. And now it's just like, well, it's kind of okay to be based out of Toledo or Minneapolis or
anywhere.
You know what? I don't know why I said Toledo. Just basically any town, and it's just like, yeah, you can be quote unquote discovered, or you know, find yourself a manager and booking and all this other stuff, and do your thing out of kind of anywhere. So that's why it's an amazing time to be in the industry and to be a part of the music scene right now. But Minneapolis, great players town, great music happening. I mean, and if you're a good musician, you can make your entire living playing local gigs here in Minneapolis, and it can be fun and it can be great. And I have a lot of friends that are playing gigs, you know, they can choose up to, you know, 3 to 7 nights a week, however much they want to play. There's a lot of music happening in Minneapolis. So it's cool.
You know what's interesting about that? LA is very similar where, well, first of all, I think you explained it really well, where like, I think every single city for the most part has a very unique music scene for itself, right? But definitely there's a specific cities that have an infrastructure set up that's made for like those national bands. And LA has a lot of music. I mean, you've come out here so many times, so you understand, like there's so many great artists and bands that come through here. They're based here. But I mean, you're saying that everyone there can play a lot if they're really good. Here in LA, for the most part, there's the up times and the down times. You know, I feel like during the summer, it's very up. There's a lot of bands that need, you know, musicians. But other than that, in my experience, at least, it can fluctuate a lot, you know, and especially because there is so much competition here. But what I'm curious about specifically, like in Minneapolis, you know, why do you feel like there's so many great musicians out there? Because again, from my experience, because I live in LA, I'm born and raised, I encounter a lot of musicians that sort of, make the transition to this city here. They grow up wherever they grow up, come to school either to LA or somewhere else, and then they move out to LA because that's the dream, I guess, But I'm curious, like in Minneapolis, the music scene seems great. I mean, you're from there. You're an incredible musician. Like, I'm curious if you understand specifically why that town is so great with the music scene, with the art. Like, what's the vibe that makes it so great, if that makes sense?
Yeah. And how does it keep churning out amazing musicians?
Yeah,
I have thought of that a lot, and I've had several people ask me that. I don't really have a definitive answer. Some of my go-to answers would be like a classic Minnesota answer. People in Minnesota love to talk about the weather. It's just like,
it's brutal, man.
Well, yeah, it is brutal. And it will be the cause of me leaving if I ever leave. Every year, I'm always threatening, like, all right, this is it. I'm done. I'm done with Minnesota. I'm out of here. It's -20, and I got to go outside and then like my hands get cold, and then I go to the studio. It's like, hey guys, I need like 30 minutes and a hot tea before I can play because like I got to warm back up. So, anyways, whatever. A lot of people will say because it's so cold in the winter, we're hanging out inside. It's like, well, you got nothing to do other than practice your instrument and get really good at your instrument.
It's just because you're trying to get out of the cold.
So that's one thing that people say. But you could also get good at biology by studying biology books outside the cold or whatever. Anyways, I think there is something to that. I will acknowledge that as a true Minnesotan there's something weather related, maybe. But I think also just like the way when I grew up, to paint a picture, when I grew up in the scene, I would go out and see bands, and the bands would be insane. They would be amazing. And like there's this place called Bunkers where there's this Sunday and Monday thing, this band Dr. Mambo's Combo, who's been playing for like 30 years there. And the band is incredible, and Prince used to go and hang out there, and he would grab some of his musicians from there, like Michael Bland and Sonny Thompson from New Power Generation, got discovered by Prince at these clubs and this sort of thing. And these guys are still, they're still going out and doing all their national stuff, but when they're home, they're playing this gig on Sunday and Monday nights. And I kind of cut my teeth going there, watching, and then eventually like, hey, can I get up and sit in? And then eventually they needed a sub because the guitar player had shoulder surgery and was going to be out for, a couple years or something, basically on and off. So I started playing that gig, and it was always just kind of looking up to that gig. Wow, these guys are incredible musicians. If I want to make it, I've got to be a good musician. And I would go to these other jams and these other things that were happening around town. All the professional musicians in town, they were just really good, and they were playing really good music. It's like, wow, you know what? I need to learn the entire Earth, Wind, and Fire catalog if I want to be a professional musician in this town. At least in this that I was doing. Obviously, there's different scenes as well. I was in the jazz thing for a while, and seeing like Dave King is from here, and Mike Lewis, and JT Bates, all these guys that are just these incredible forward-thinking musicians. One of my favorite guitar players in the world, this guy Dean McGraw, I would go see him, maybe 5 times a month for years.
Damn.
And just
that's
really
commitment, man.
Yeah. Well, it was just, I was so into this dude's playing, and he was so inspiring that every time I would go watch him, it was like, oh, wow, that's a really cool guitar move. Oh, wow, how did you do that? Oh, wow, you're pulling that off on a Strat? I wonder if I can pull that off on a Strat. And then I would go see him and he'd play acoustic guitar. It's like, wow, you do that on the acoustic too. Anyways, there was a lot of...
Can you do that on the acoustic? That's the question, though.
I play a lot of acoustic. I have learned a lot from a lot of people. And in college, I shed the acoustic, the classical, and the electric guitar more hours than I like to admit.
Damn.
But I'm proud of it because, I don't know, it helped me get to where I'm at. So the scene, as far as nurturing great musicians, is just kind of the expectation. Granted, there's other scenes as well. There's an amazing rock and indie scene. There's an amazing jazz scene. And it's just cool to see that, and just to be a part of something where it's like, you know, if you want to be a part of this, you got to actually be able to play.
Yeah.
And that's maybe one of the reasons also. So yeah, that's kind of how Minneapolis gets a lot of great players.
It's interesting because like I've talked to a couple, well, let me put it this way. A lot of the musicians that I get to know, that, I bring on the show, a lot of them live in the specific cities that I mentioned before. There's a couple handful that don't live there, and I recently spoke to another guitarist who was from New Jersey, who primarily lived in Philly and then recently moved to Los Angeles. But he was basically describing a very similar situation in Philly where, you had a lot of the gospel players that basically grew up in that area, and they were monstrous, and if you wanted to play, if you wanted to join in on the jams, you had to be good. Like, you just had to go watch, figure out what they were doing, go back home, or whatever, practice and get back and come back and be able to hold your own. Because if you didn't, it was just like an awkward thing. You know what I mean? But it's interesting that you get a lot of these really good players from lesser known areas. And it seems to me like, LA and the bigger metropolises is where they sort of come, after that incubation period to sort of, do their thing. Minnesota is definitely that place that is a great place to sort of go and develop your chops early on. And then if you wanted to, move on to a different place, like you are about to do, because you're about to sell that house after you're done with this winter.
Yeah. Everybody around me is always just like, yeah, man, we're just waiting for you. There's no surprise when you move. We just know that it's coming. And I'm like,
where would you go, by the way?
Nashville. Nashville feels like it's either Nashville or LA. And Nashville feels like the obvious one to me because I do a lot of session work there. There's a lot of producers that I work with there and artists that I play with, and I have a lot of friends there. LA would be another obvious one because I have a lot of friends that I play with that are there. And I love California. California is insane.
It's the best.
Oh, it really is. Okay. And then there's all these like, fear and insecurity about myself that sets in about, whatever. Well, am I going to be able to afford it? Blah, 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 this and that and this and that. There's plenty of people that make not a lot of money that make it work there. The tough thing for me is, well, it's not a tough thing. It's the additional challenge that I have for moving is that I have 2 kids and a wife, and my kids need to go to school. And right now I send them to a public school. They're 5 and 7. I send them to a public school right here by my house, and it's amazing. It's ranked 10 out of 10 in the U.S. national rankings or whatever.
Wow.
It's incredible. And in Nashville, like Nashville proper, the school rankings are 4 out of 10, 3 out of 10, unless I move to like Brentwood or Franklin. This is some deep like dad research stuff.
Hey! I come from that public school system. All right.
Me too. My school was ranked 6 out of 10, and I liked my school. But when I think back on it, it's like, oh, yeah, I could have had some better teachers there. Oh, now I kind of look back and understand. Oh, yeah.
You do have a point, though. That is true.
So the tough thing is I want to send my kids to a good school, and I want them to have a great quality of life. Granted, there's plenty of kids that grow up in Nashville schools that are wonderful. And it's just right now it's hard to move away from my house where I have great public education and I have a half-acre yard, and my house is really cheap relatively. Like you
can't find that in LA.
Can't get that in LA, and even in Nashville, it's like it's twice for what I have here in Minnesota. It's twice the price in Nashville, and it's probably 6 times the price in LA.
Oh yeah.
So. Yeah, I don't know. It's dad stuff that is challenging, but it's part of my life. It's part of my journey where I'm at. And if I were to move, it would need to be a very compelling reason. But I feel like I'm almost to that point. And I don't know. I feel like I'm always like a month away from moving to Nashville.
It's always that case, right? Well, I'm curious. You mentioned earlier, and I want to circle back to some of the other things too, but like, Aside from maybe like the financial side, right? Because that's really the issue for a lot of us. So anything that we do, especially moves, finances can definitely be the huge deciding factor. But you mentioned you have a couple of other insecurities, or maybe that was the only insecurity. But like, I'm curious, like if you're comfortable talking about it, like what other insecurities do you have other than having a big move with a family, which is a really big decision, to another city? Are there any other insecurities that you have? Any other sort of doubts that come to mind when it comes to moving to either LA or Nashville?
Where do I start?
Oh shit.
I am very confident in what I do. I'm confident in my skill set. I feel called to do what I do. I know that I'm in the field and doing the thing that I'm supposed to be doing with my life. So I'm confident in that. But I think there are just general insecurities about, I think we all have stresses in our life that we say that we're stressed about things, but really it's just fear because like, oh, I'm stressed about my job. I'm stressed about, this work project, mostly because I'm afraid that I'm not going to do it well and I won't get hired back, or I'm going to lose my job. And then I'm afraid that I'm not going to have enough money to do this or this or this. So a lot of our stresses really just come down to our fears. So I think for me, my fears and my insecurities are like, well, people like the way that I play guitar right now. I get called, to do sessions and all this stuff. But what if that work dries up? Then am I going to have to do something else? Like if all of a sudden my cost of living is super high, am I going to have to figure out something else to do? Or am I going to have to change the way that I play? Granted, then my defense is like, well, I play all kinds of guitar. Like I play gigs. In a couple weeks, I'm going to play classical guitar with the Minnesota Orchestra. It's like anybody who's seen me play like with Vulfpeck or my side thing would have no idea that I play that way. Or
I had no idea either, man.
What
pieces are you playing? Sorry, I don't mean. I'm just curious.
I have not opened the email yet.
Oh shit.
I know
You're just going to sight read it. You're going to show up and sight read it.
No, I'm not quite that good at sight reading anymore. I was in college, maybe. Or at least I liked to think that I was when I was in college. Looking back, you're never as great as you probably thought you were in college. I think that goes for just about everybody.
Unless you're Yo-Yo Ma, though. Unless you're like Yo-Yo Ma.
Yeah, Yo-Yo Ma. Yeah, that's a totally different story. But I think I have insecurities about... I don't know. I have insecurities about that kind of thing. And then it's also just like the fear of, well, I also have a fear of if my touring stuff really does take off, then here's what the scenario might look like that I'm afraid of. Right now, I'm in Minneapolis with my family and my wife's family, as everybody is here. So when I leave town for a tour, when I go out for 3 weeks, I have a support system in place to help out my family and to help out with my kids and all that kind of stuff. Let's say I move down to Nashville. Okay, family, we're up and moving to Nashville. Oh, daddy got a gig. I'm leaving for 5 weeks. Peace out. You're in this brand new city where you don't really know a whole lot of people.
Yeah.
I have a lot of friends here. And I'm leaving. So that's the fear, is that beyond just like the financial thing, is that the family support and the connecting support for my kids connecting with their grandparents and their aunts and uncles. I grew up around my grandparents loosely, like my grandparents were an hour away, and I loved the time that I spent with them. And I want my kids to be able to spend time with their family. And transparently, I will take it another layer. I don't need anybody to feel pity for me saying this, and this isn't why, that's not at all my intention for saying this, but my dad has early onset Alzheimer's, and I like to be around my dad right now, and I want my kids to be around my dad and to have memories with their grandpa that are going to be positive and remember him when he has his full cognitive capacity. So, there's all that kind of stuff that goes into it. It's like, oh man, I want to be able to share my life with my dad for the next several years, because with that sort of thing, you don't know when it's going to start to be more degenerative or whatever as far as his cognitive ability. So there's all of that. And then it's like, well, you got to strike when the iron's hot. And there's all this industry like, oh, why aren't you playing more? Why aren't you out there touring more? And you got to hit all these, B markets and C markets and just keep building it and growing it and growing. It's like, oh, I got all this stuff that's like, I don't know. And it's so much like, it's easy to complain about when it's there, when I have the option to tour or not tour or to play on a bunch of sessions. But I think it's just one of those things where it's like, there, just like anything in life, there are growing pains to your career or growing pains to your knees when you're 8 years old. And it's like, oh, why do my legs hurt? Well, you're growing. Well, why does that make sense? That doesn't make sense. Why do my legs hurt when I'm growing? I don't know. There's things like that I'm having to think about now a little bit more. And I'm very blessed and fortunate for all those things. But there's some of those fears. And then there's also just like artistic insecurity that I think we all have, and I try to, I don't dwell on that because I'm not like an insecure person by any means. If I were super insecure, I wouldn't talk about my insecurities, but I like to let them all be out on the table. And I think it's important to talk about those things and like release those thoughts from my mind,
Yeah. Well, especially because, like you mentioned, every single, not even just musician, any sort of creative person goes through those insecurities. And before I even continue, I gotta say thank you for being open with me, because you're absolutely right. I think it's very important to talk about those things, no matter, who you're with or whatever. I think it helps to release those thoughts, from your mind. And the reason why I was curious, and I'm always interested in this, it's because, as musicians that we are, especially someone like you who's very well known and who people look up to, what I find whenever I have, amateurs or other people that are looking to get in the career and they reach out to me and they have a certain amount of questions, I sort of get the vibe that a lot of these people, they have role models. I'm assuming that you're a role model to a lot of people, to myself as well. I gotta be honest with you. I don't play guitar, but if I played guitar, I'd want to play like you, man.
Thank you.
And so it can be very easy, to idolize someone and to forget about the humanity of someone and to understand the choices that matter, and that's something that I'm very fascinated in. And I try to do my best to show everyone that listens to this show and that follows my stuff that, hey, the reason why Corey's here, the reason why so-and-so is here is because they've made certain choices, but in a way, they're just like you. They still have the same, some of the same insecurities and stuff, but the difference is that they're willing to stare at it and understand it and be able to move past it, or at least deal with it in a very healthy way that allows them to continue moving forward in their career. And I think you've done that really well, and I think you're doing that really well. And I really appreciate you being honest with me, because I think it's important for every single musician to be able to take a step back, see where they're at, see the choices that they need to make, and not necessarily get so, I don't want to say emotional, but it's so easy to get very destructive. You know what I mean? To be like, fuck it. Music industry tells me I need to do all this shit. I got to just like get up and go. But like, you have a family, you have things that are important to you that in a way help you with your career, and I think it's important that as musicians, as artists, that we need to spend time really understanding those choices about ourselves, if that makes sense.
Totally. And I think the other important thing is like, wherever somebody's at, in their life, that's where you're at on the journey right now, and your journey has led you to where you're at, and you're going to keep going on the journey. I have a lot of people like, oh man, they'll contact me and say, dude, I love what you do, but I feel like I'm ready. I've been ready to tour. I'm a great musician. I've done this and this and this and this, but I can't seem to get a tour or whatever. What do you have? What kind of advice do you have? I'm like, well, how old are you? Like, well, I'm 23. Like, well, to be honest, I didn't step on a tour bus until I was 29. That was like my first time actually touring. So like, I don't know what to tell you in some cases, other than, I have obviously a lot of things that I think have attributed to what has gotten me to where I am, and will get somebody to where they want to be, just like work ethic things and just some generic, well, not generic, but some things that I think are standard practice, good things to do to get to where you want to be. But it's just like, there are some people who have started their journey touring, doing their thing when they're 20. And there are some people that have accomplished those things. They started doing it when they're 30, 40, 50. Like if you think about, people like Jimi Hendrix and Amy Winehouse and Bradley Nowell from Sublime, all these people that died mid-20s. It's like, whoa, their breadth of work is insane on how much they were able to accomplish in their 20s. And then I was just looking at, all this artwork from different things, and I was looking at just of all things. I oftentimes reference the Mona Lisa because it's like, man, when am I going to make my Mona Lisa? When am I going to paint my masterpiece? And I was like, oh, Da Vinci painted the Mona Lisa when he was in his 50s.
Yeah,
I'm like, I'm good, dude. I got 20 years before I got to, it all of a sudden took this pressure off of me. Like, I got to do it now. I've got to make my masterpiece.
So true, man.
And if I don't do it this year, it's never going to happen. It's like, well, you know what? I'm going to keep developing. I'm going to keep going on my journey. I feel like in the last couple of years, I found my voice as a musician and as a person and as a guitar player. So now, if I can continue to develop that voice and keep painting pictures and putting out records, at some point I might find myself where I paint that picture that I feel like this is exactly it. This is exactly what I've wanted to say, and encapsulates all the emotion and whatever that I've wanted to, all this artistic expression that I've wanted to make. You know
what's interesting about what you just said is you're absolutely right. I think there's a lot of pressure for people in this industry. When you look at, some of our role models, like we were just talking about, there's a huge pressure that we want to make that thing that defines a career. But here's the interesting thing that took me years to learn. I feel like I'm still learning it, and I probably will continue to learn this as I get older, is that all these masterpieces, all these things that we look at, when we idolize them, right? And you can tell me if you agree or disagree with me, but for me, it's a lot of these artists that made these, they didn't necessarily know they were making a masterpiece when they made it. And obviously it was very beautiful, but we look at it now, 500 years later, I don't know when specifically it was finished, and we see it and we're like, wow, he must have been amazed when he made that. But I really try and put myself in his shoes, who, by the way, he seemed to be very ahead of his time. But to really try and sit there and understand that, did he really know after he was done with the Mona Lisa that this was going to be one of the best paintings, one of the top 10 paintings of all time 500 years later? I'm not so sure that that's what crossed his mind. And I think the important thing of what you're saying for a lot of musicians is that pressure to constantly be, I need to make the next big thing can sort of kill your creativity and in a way sort of stop your progress. If that makes sense. I'm not sure if you agree with that or not, but that's at least the way I see it.
Yeah. And I think it's the internal pressure thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that. I have felt that pressure on myself on certain records and certain things that I've done. But yes, I agree with you. I think where I'm at right now is I'm just going to make the music that really moves me right now, and it'll show where I'm at on my current journey, where I'm at today and where I'm at this year. And I think, if I just get too wrapped up in, I need to paint my masterpiece right now, it might just stifle me because I'm like, I screwed up on, bar 33 measure. Bar 33, halfway through the measure, I'm playing this E minor 7 chord, but that D is not really ringing out as well as I want. Let me just punch in that one note on that thing. Okay, and then on this one thing, there's a little bit of a string noise there. Okay, I want to take that out, and blah, 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 blah. And there's all this kind of stuff that you can do, where it's like you can over-edit and over-analyze.
Yeah.
And then it's like, am I putting enough this or that into the thing? And I'm just going to make what I can right now. I'm going to make what moves me and what I feel is good. And afterwards, I'll let other people decide whether something is good or not. And the internet is really good at that right now. The internet is very good at telling you what they think you're really good at. And unfortunately, the comments section is also in YouTube is really good at telling you what they don't like about you.
So true.
But it's just like, you know what? Your best content on the internet is going to get way more attention, and that might be a clue onto what people like that you do.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Obviously, there's other things that go into that, but I don't know. I think right now where I'm at is definitely just trying to put my best art out that I feel expresses what I want to say at this time. And also relieving the pressure of like, yes, this maybe defines me on where I'm at, but it also kind of just defines me where I'm at right now. Yeah. And one of the times that I had a real realization of that is I was in Amsterdam this last fall, and there was a Salvador Dali and Banksy art museum. It was like a Dali Banksy museum thing. And like a 2-story building, small building, very digestible in an hour type museum. Yeah. It was great. It took visual art for me to understand this, but so I have my own idea and perception of like what Banksy's art is. I have a vision of what his sound and what his thing is. And same with Salvador Dali, like his thing. I feel like, oh yeah, I know what his thing is. But when I went to the museum, I started to see this artwork that basically kind of showed me part of this person's journey, where it was like late 90s Banksy work had a sound. And I say sound because I'm a musician. It had a look, it had a sound. Banksy had he was developing a sound. And then all of a sudden, like early 2000s, it really started to hone in and mine in on the gold of what his sound was. And then it was like, oh, there's that thing all of a sudden now that so many people say is the Banksy thing. Oh, that's him. And then kind of late aughts, where it's like, starting to get 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12, where the sound developed even more, and it started to grow into this different thing. And then it was all of a sudden kind of a new era of his sound. And same thing with Dali, where because I've been alive in all those years, it really hit home a little bit more. It was like, wow, this guy had eras of his thing. And it's like this late 90s thing is where he was at. And then early 2000s, like, okay, this is where people are really recognizing his thing. And it kind of blew up general public knowing Banksy and that sort of thing. And then developing more and more. It's like, wow, the art that I make right now maybe defines who I am, but it just defines who I am right now. And I could totally continue to change and develop my sound. It's like, well, yeah, no crap. Look at the Beatles. It's like, oh yeah. Take it back to music. Well, look at the Beatles. Look at the breadth of their career and their sound. All this reinvention of who they were, but still just being who they were in it. It's very inspiring. And it was also very freeing for me to kind of have that understanding. But it was inspired first by this art museum where I could literally see year after year. Because when I go to like the Louvre or something, or, some of these art museums where you see this Renaissance art or medieval or whatever, where it's like, when I see 1600 or 1503, the Mona Lisa or whatever, it's like, but 1460, it's all kind of the same to me. But it's like, no, 40 years is a huge difference. But I don't quite have an anchor point for what was going on in society, where they were at and that sort of thing. So those numbers kind of end up just kind of all being the same. 1500s, I don't know, 1503 to 1593, whatever. It kind of makes no difference. But it makes a huge difference, and especially where somebody's at in their life, how old they were when they made something, or that's what. So, I don't know. Maybe that's a little bit of a tangent, but it was something that allowed me to be freed from thinking that I need to really, I don't know. It was freeing artistically for me to be able to just accept and be cool with who I am right now, be proud of who I am right now as an artist, and continue to develop and inspiring to get better and better too.
No, man, I think it's incredibly important to word it that way, because I think it's very rare to see, someone's work or someone's progression year by year. Because you're absolutely right. We have the Getty Center out here in LA, which I go to a lot. And like you said, it's very easy to sort of like bunch a lot of artistic work, which was very important at the time and very important in, showing where the artist was. But not only that, but showing where society was in a given era. And so often than not, you can, sort of bunch everything together. Like, here's 1560 to, 1590. That's like what? Like 30 fucking years? That's like our whole entire life, and there's a lot of shit that happens in between, and it's so easy to kind of sort of bunch all that stuff together. And more often than not, the art you see is probably like the best work that they could find. But I think it's very important to see that progression, to see an artist's struggle and an artist's growth, and to see where they were at a specific year, to see the ups and downs, because sometimes some years they make some great stuff. Then they move on and try to experiment with some other stuff that wasn't as well as widely accepted. But then you sort of start to see that overall line that goes up. You know, there's tons of ups and downs, but overall it goes up until you finally get to what we were talking about, that Mona Lisa, where it all makes sense. We're like, this is where it was all leading to. It makes sense. But when you're in it, the important thing is to remember that you got to be comfortable with who you are and believe you're always going to get to where you're going to be, as long as you're pushing forward and sticking to your guns and being yourself. And I think you're doing that really well, man. And I'm curious, because you're basically saying that you've worked hard to understand who you are and to be comfortable and to love the music that you're making. I'm curious, like, what are you working on right now that would define, like, 2018, or at least the era that you're in right now? Like, what is the kind of music that you're putting out right now, or projects that you're working on right now?
Yeah. I'm processing everything you're saying, and yes,
I'm sorry. Great. I have a habit of just
my answer was yeah, which is totally not the right. Just to piggyback on that, though, a little bit, I think the other thing to also take into consideration, and especially for me, and this does tie into what I'm doing now and what I'm doing this year and what is currently, just finished bouncing my producer's mix on a track that I'm working on for my next record. But not only, so far the kind of stuff that I've talked about has been self-motivated and like very
which is important,
personally satisfied. Yeah. But I think for me, part of my biggest vision for what I'm doing and what I do is beyond just what I feel like is painting my masterpiece, is really something like, how do I bring, my thing is I want to bring joy and happiness to other people through my music. I want people to have fun when they listen to my music. I want what I do to bring joy to other people. And that's why I'm totally cool. Just like, I don't know, we got the take. There's plenty of mistakes in it, but I don't care, because it feels good and it brings me joy. And yeah, like, there's a wrong note in my guitar thing, but yeah, whatever. I don't know. It's fine. And the guys that are mixing, like, hey man, should we fix that? I'm like, no, it's fine. And it's like, because my goal is not, I need to be respected and known as the greatest guitar player in the world. It's like, it's not it. It's just like, I want people to find joy in the things that I do and from the music that I'm playing. And that as part of my vision, and like the leading, like that's the North Star for my for what I do. That helps really keep everything into perspective too, from me getting too overly analytical about my musical playing and like, do I have enough technical facility to pull this off and impress all of these people? Like, whatever. Maybe I do. Awesome, great. That's cool if it is, but that's a byproduct of the first goal being, I want to bring joy and happiness and fun. And yeah, like I like to play fun, challenging music too, and that sort of thing. But what I'm working on right now is a new record, a new Cory Wong record. And I recorded about 18 songs already, trying to figure out how I'm going to release it. I think my plan, so I did a full-length record this last year, felt really great about it. But I think what I'm going to do this year is 2 EPs. So late spring and then maybe late fall or something.
Why split them up? I'm just curious.
I don't know. I feel like I want to split them up into 2 different types of collections songs.
Nice.
And also for me just to be able to, I think just as far as business-wise, release something that's a little more digestible. Well, like going to the Banksy Dali Museum, where I can just go there in an afternoon and not feel so much pressure. Like, I got to be here for an entire afternoon. Scaled down version of it, but I guess this ties it in. The Dali and Banksy Museum was like a 2-story house. It just looked like a nice big house. where it's like, oh yeah, I can go in there, check out that museum, and do that. It's not very intimidating to look at it and just go, okay, yeah, I can digest that in an afternoon and leave feeling very compelled by the art. Where I was also kind of right down the road is the Reich Museum or whatever it is in Amsterdam. It's a huge museum with a lot of art. It was very intimidating, like, oh man, I'm going to have to spend the whole day there to be able to digest all of it and whatever. So I'm drawing a similar parallel with my record where this year I want to put out something where late spring, something very easily digestible, something that I feel like is a good collection for where I'm at. And then in the fall, do another one. So I have 18 songs I've recorded. I'm going to pick the 6 that I think are the best that fit as a collection for this spring. I'm going to probably do a couple more recording sessions in the summer, and then I'll have, whatever the other 12 songs are from this collection that I've already recorded and the new songs, and just pick the best collection of those ones to put out. And then everything that's left over, I'm going to be really sad that I didn't release it because I'm really excited about all the music that I've recorded. But good thing is I'll be able to just pick what I think is the best and put that stuff out and feel good about that.
I'm definitely looking forward to hearing you play more. You know what? One of the things I wanted to ask you a little early on, which I'm glad I get a chance to circle back to, is your style of playing, your guitar style. Like, I love watching you and hearing you play. Anytime I see a video, I was incredibly blessed to watch you play live as well. I see you having fun and I stare at you playing. I'm trying to figure out half of the stuff that you're doing. Cause again, I'm a drummer, I'm not a guitarist, but I know a little bit and you blow me away. I have no idea what you're doing. So obviously we were talking about the Minnesota scene and how, you had to dive in and make sure that you were on point so that you could jam out. I'm curious, what developed your musical style as a whole? So obviously the jam sessions helped out a lot, I imagine. But I'm curious more of your school background and maybe how you got started with music in general. Obviously we can talk for hours about, your backstory and who taught you this and who taught you that. But I'm curious, maybe did you have a musical family member? Did you what got you started in that journey? And then what sort of influenced your style to this day? If that makes sense. Pretty broad question. I know I'm
totally.
So tell me your whole entire life history in an answer. But I'm just curious, in general, what contributed to your musical style today?
Yeah, so I guess I would say the journey started with my dad just showing me a lot of music that he was really into. And obviously as a kid, you've got your own stuff that it's oh, wow, that music is really exciting. For me, it really started in middle school where I realized that music really had an impact on my state of mind and my energy. And it's wow, when I listen to Rage Against the Machine, it makes me want to skateboard faster and harder.
You were a skater? What?
Yeah, and I was a punk rock kid. And by punk rock kid, I don't mean Oakland or Orange County punk rocker. I was, Minnesota punk rock.
Minnesota punk rock. Interesting.
But that doesn't really mean anything. It basically means I wasn't hardcore punk rocker. But I was into,
you were a poser.
No, I could skate, man. I could still skate.
What? That's dope. Okay, next time you come out, I don't mean to interrupt. Next time you come out to LA, we got to go skateboarding.
All right, I'm in. I got to be a little more careful these days because
same here.
It's my livelihood.
If I ever fall off a skateboard, there goes my drumming career. Come on.
Yeah. I listened to a lot of Green Day, Rancid, Rage Against the Machine, Red Hot Chili Peppers, that kind of stuff, alt rock. I was huge into 90s alt rock. And then my dad was he was a huge jazz head and just music lover growing up. So he had all these albums in the house and in the car. He had, Weather Report, Mahavishnu Orchestra, Jocko, Keith Jarrett, Jan Garbarek, Ralph Towner. These records that to me maybe seemed obscure. Or, well, actually, no, maybe the opposite. Maybe these records that were just part of music that are more obscure to a lot of people. Who's Jan Garbarek or Ralph Towner? I'm what do you mean you don't know Ralph Towner? He's one of the greatest guitar players, blah, blah, blah. So it's I grew up listening to that stuff. And it is maybe more obscure, but I don't know, that kind of music was always around in the house. So I was interested in that sort of music and music that had some more substance to it, but also the kind of music that had driving energy. And then in high school, I played like in a ska band, and I loved ska.
Hell yeah.
And then eventually started getting into the jam stuff. And like every good college kid in the early 2000s, loved Dave Matthews Band and that sort of
Nice.
thing.
You got to go through that motion. Dave
Yeah,
Matthews.
yeah, totally. And then, yeah, started, I mean, it is all, and then Earth, Wind and Fire hit me, and Prince and all. I mean, growing up in Minneapolis, Prince was kind of everywhere. So that's kind of where I started. And then I went to music school, and
Where'd you go to school? Is it still in Minnesota?
yep, I started at the University of Minnesota as well. Funny thing, as part of the journey was like, I can't do music for a living. I better get a real job. And this was totally in my own head. And again, with my own insecurities of just not knowing what it could look like to be a professional musician. When I was 18, when I went to college, I went to the University of Minnesota for science, and I was a science kid and loved it, was good at it. But then all of a sudden it was realizing this doesn't really feel like what I'm supposed to be doing in life.
Yeah.
Everybody is inspired by my guitar playing that I'm around. Why don't I just play guitar? And then it was just more and more people telling me, man, you really should just, play guitar. You should just do that. And so after the University of Minnesota, I went to McNally Smith College of Music in St. Paul, which unfortunately now just closed down. But went to school there, did a lot of my, pop music training. It was a contemporary music school, so pop music training, jazz. I did a lot of classical guitar and acoustic guitar there too. My teacher was a guy who's like this famous Peruvian guitar player named Andres Prado, and he just happened to be living in Minnesota for like 5 years. And when I was in college, he was there. So he taught me a lot of Latin American folk music and classical guitar stuff, which I'm forever grateful for, because that really helped develop even just part of who I am. And one of the main things that he taught me is, don't worry about trying to sound like Pat Metheny or Jeff Beck or whatever. Try to sound like you. Try to figure out what you sound like and that sort of thing. And that was my biggest thing that I learned from school, outside of just the mechanics of the instrument and everything. And then from there, it was starting to do more jobbing gigs and function band things where I'm, playing weddings and events. I had my own band that I was playing with for a while. I was wanting to be a jazzer for a lot of years, so I had a weekly I had a weekly jazz gig for 7 years, starting when I was in college, and then I started playing more with Dr. Mambo's Combo, with the guys in Bunkers, with that thing, and then started doing a little more touring with some pop stuff. Started doing a lot more sessions. And then I was doing some touring. I still do a lot of playing with this guy, Ben Rector, who's based out of Nashville. I've done all kinds of crazy, weird gigs with other artists. Like I played stuff with Gene Simmons.
Nice.
And yeah, all kinds of different artists that I've either toured with or recorded with. And this kind of led me now to my main things that I do now. I play with Vulfpeck. I do my solo thing, and I play with Ben Rector. Ben hasn't been doing as much this last year. He's been working on a record, which I'm super excited for him to have his record out, because it's awesome. So those are kind of my main three things now, that as far as like different artists that I'm playing with, but I also just play on a bunch of different records. And yeah.
It's interesting to me that you were trying to find another, or you were like going after the science thing. I never would have imagined that, especially with someone as good as you. And I can relate a little bit, just because like when I first started going to school, like I was pretty much a brainiac in high school, not so much afterwards. I mean, I think that ended in high school. Like I stopped being so into the books. But like I actually applied to all these universities, as a mechanical engineer, believe it or not.
Yeah.
And I got into all these like really like Ivy League schools and stuff, but I sort of did that Not necessarily to please my parents, but it was definitely like you said, an inner insecurity of like, I knew that I wanted to do music for a while. But in my head, I was thinking to myself, I got to find something real. You know what I mean? And so, I applied to like UC Berkeley, UCLA, all those schools that I got into. And I remember, and I'm just giving you a little bit more of my backstory is,
Sure.
I was in the high school jazz band, and I had applied and gotten into all these schools, and I was really considering going to UC Berkeley. I had a full ride scholarship and all that. And one of the directors that would come and lead our jazz band, she taught at this university called California State University Northridge, which has one of the best jazz programs in California. I think the best now. And so, she really helped me and convinced me like, hey, you should really go after this music thing. They have a great music program at CSUN. And, long story short, I ended up like basically saying no to all these other universities. And I decided to go to Cal State Northridge and study music there. And it's just interesting because everyone, a little bit opposite from you, told me I was crazy. They're like, how could you give up a full ride scholarship to one of these Ivy League universities to go study music at a lesser known university? Are you fucking crazy? And that was sort of like the attitude I got from like, and believe it or not, from like some of my teachers and some of like, colleagues and even friends of my parents. They're like, dude, I wish my kid got a full ride scholarship to this university and he's just giving it up. But luckily, I had a really good support system. My immediate family was very much like, hey, you go and pursue music because you're good at it. Go do your thing. You don't have to go to, all these big universities to make us proud. And that sort of helped me. And there's other things that happen after that. But I find that interesting because I feel like really good musicians, really people that really understand who they are sometimes go through that where like they have to make that choice where they're faced with that like reality, quote unquote. Do I want to stick to this safer route or do I want to go the more risky route that feels more honest to who I am? And I think you obviously made that choice and it's been paying off, man.
Yeah. I mean, it was a huge leap of faith. It took a lot of deliberating in my mind and talking through with a lot of different people. But basically, once I made the leap of faith, it was like, all right, I'm going. This is what I was made to do. I'm doing it. And I haven't looked back once since.
And it's been great, man. I mean, one of the things I'm curious about, right, is you have an amazing guitar style that meshes well with anyone that you play with. And like you mentioned earlier, right now you're playing with Ben Rector and a couple other people, and you're also playing with Vulfpeck, which I think is an amazing accomplishment because I think almost everyone that's listening on the show knows who these guys are. I think Vulfpeck has, changed the music industry in a very positive way. They sort of came out of nowhere and in a way used what we were talking about earlier, the internet, at least from my knowledge, to sort of, establish themselves and create this ripple effect. And you are a part of that. And I'm just curious, like how that happened, like how you got to play with these guys and how you've been collaborating with them. I see you in the videos. I fucking love the videos. I love the music. I remember the very first one I watched where you were in it. I was like, who's that guy? And now I got a chance to meet you. So like, I'm curious, like how that happened, man.
Well, oddly enough, it came from the Dr. Mambo's Combo Bunkers thing.
Really?
Where I was playing there and, I was just doing the gig as normal and doing the thing. And I saw these dudes come in one night and they were hanging out watching. I don't know if you can do like, I don't know if you have the same thing as me, but I can always tell who the musicians are in the crowd.
Yeah, I totally can. I feel like most musicians can.
Yeah, like musicians just watch other musicians playing in a different way. Like they're paying attention in a different way. I don't know. I can just always tell that guy's a musician, that girl's a musician, that guy's a musician, that girl's a musician, blah, 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 that sort of thing.
There's a certain look, you could just tell like they're like watching your hands or some shit,
Yeah. It's a totally different thing. And it's totally cool. I know people can spot me doing it. Whatever. It's not good. It's not bad. It
just is.
Yeah. So I saw this group of dudes walk in, my age. I could tell they were musicians just because I can tell musicians when they're watching a band. And they looked like they were totally into it. And I'm thinking to myself, how do I not know these guys? They're my age. I can tell that they're musicians. They look like they would be my friends. How do I not know these dudes? And then on the set break, kind of walked up and then they came up and we were starting to talk and hanging out, found out that they were in from out of town. it was a handful of the guys from the band that were playing as sidemen for another artist that was in Minneapolis doing something. And eventually we started talking, hanging out, realized we had a few mutual friends, had breakfast the next morning, started hanging out a little more often. Like when they would come to town, I would hang out with them. I was going to LA a lot at the time because I was doing a bunch of other work in LA, and I would hang out with them there. We'd start playing together a little bit more, and eventually just started playing, hanging more. And now, we've been touring the world with these dudes, and it's been amazing. It's incredible. It's so much fun. It's the most fun to play with these guys. It just feels like there's so much. It's so comfortable. It feels at home, and it feels just fun. And yeah, I don't know how to describe it other than it's amazing. It's super fun.
It's one of those things that when it just happens, it happens. There's no really like systematic thing that you can understand. It's just, it makes sense, right? Like you're just like, wow, like how do I mesh how do I mesh so well with these people? And it's amazing to me to watch you guys play because, you know, I've been to a couple of your shows already, and I feel like everyone tuned into the show has watched at least a couple of the videos, and you guys are just a machine. You know, when you guys play live and when you guys play together, you guys are so tight, and it just seems like you guys understand each other so well musically. I'm just curious, like, how does that communication work outside of the camera or outside of stage? Do you guys rehearse a lot, or do you guys just like talk about it, or do you guys just sit there and maybe it comes from the jamming, but I'm just curious, like, how is it that you guys can communicate so well?
There really is like never any rehearsal.
I'm not surprised.
So most of it is just, all right, these are the tunes that we're going to do. Make sure that you're prepared ahead of time. Sometimes Jack will throw a curveball. Jack's the leader of the band. And a big part of it is just everybody understanding that they need to be prepared. Everybody just also being a monster musician and under the leadership of a great leader who can lead a band and who can guide the big picture vision of the whole thing. And also the 100% safety net of if things fall apart, just give it to Joe Dart and he will save the moment. You know, it's just like, is something going wrong? Pass the ball to Joe and he'll, you know, shoot a half court shot and make it every time. So there's some security and safety net with that, and just comfort in knowing that Joe can pull you out of anything. But I don't know. I think Jack is a great leader on stage. He guides us. We just always know everybody ears up and keep your focus and keep your head on every show, every measure, every note. Just pay attention. And if everybody's doing that, then we're responding to each other. We're listening to Jack as far as where he wants to take it. And Theo is just an amazing front man as well. And he'll do, I mean, it's such a fun show. And I think that the biggest thing for me is I'm noticing everybody's ears are just on all the time. Everybody's paying attention. Everybody's responding and doing that sort of thing, which makes it a super fun thing to play because we all have a respect for each other as musicians and as people. And if everybody's ears are on and our instincts are up, then that's how it, you know, I don't know. That's how I think it should be, rather than just like, all right, yeah, you know, we rehearsed all this stuff and I know my parts and I'm going to play them and like, I'm just going to, you know, go days out and whatever.
Well, that's what makes it so fresh, is that you guys are basically just listening, using the ears, basically the one thing that we're all good at as musicians.
Yeah, or at least we try to be good at.
I think you guys are. And you know what? And one more thing that I'm curious about is, so you're doing more of your own solo thing now. You're still working on your own specific things now. Like, I'm curious, like, watching Jack or being in Vulfpeck, has that helped you at all to do your own like solo things, to be more of a leader, to be more of like more sure of yourself when you're being musically creative? I know we talked about like the 2 EPs that you're doing, the band that you're sort of leading. I'm curious, like, are there any lessons learned from being in this band that basically keeps you on your toes? And again, that you guys are so phenomenal together. Any lessons learned that have helped you get better and sort of be able to lead your own stuff that you're currently doing now?
Yes, 100%. And beyond just that, it's just learning from other great leaders. So
True.
Jack is a great leader. Jack has a great leadership style on stage, just being able to direct the band and do it all in a fun way. And I've learned just a lot just watching and being a part of something where you have to pay attention and learning like, here's the positives, here's things that definitely worked, here's things that could have been tweaked, and we talk about it afterwards, and things that could be better. Just the more experience you have, the better that you can be once you start to go out and do your own thing. Ben Rector is an amazing leader. He's a great visionary also. Ben has such great leadership skills and learning, and being able to be led underneath him and underneath Jack has helped me a lot as a leader. And I think that's one of the important things. If you want to be a leader at some point, you need to learn how to be led. And
so true.
I think another part of that is also seeing how other leaders allow you to flourish in your thing and what you do, and being able to point out the X factor about each person, and learning how do I put it? So Jack sees Joe Dart's X factor and mine and Theo's and Woody's and Antoine's and Joey's and everybody's, and learns and has a way to put them all together. He has a vision on how to put all these pieces together, and he really sets up an environment for all of us to thrive in our thing, but together, there's something that is so much bigger than it would just be on its own. Same with Ben Rector, where he's able to see, each person in the band. Wow, you're really good at this. I bet we could do that thing with this thing and this thing and this thing, and kind of see it all. It's tough to say chess master, because you're like, somebody playing chess, but seeing or solving a puzzle, because I don't know. It feels weird to say that, but just looking at all these pieces and figuring out how to make something great by using everybody's gifts and talents that they have to their fullest capacity within the thing that you're trying to do. I don't know. That's been a big learning experience, figuring that sort of thing out, and then doing the same thing with the guys that play in my band.
And honestly, I'm curious, how you mentioned that in order to figure out how to be a good leader, you need to also learn how to be led. And I'm curious, have you ever, as a guitarist, and I don't mean, I'm not trying to what's the word? Not stereotype, but group you guys all together. But I have definitely played in my earlier years with some guitarists that definitely like to overplay. And as a drummer, drummers love to overplay as well. I definitely will put myself in that category. But I'm curious, for you, did you ever have a hard time, as a guitarist, as a great guitarist, being led or wanting to do your own thing while being in the band? Or have you always been this is my role and I'm going to own my role and shine when I have to, but also lay back when I have to? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I've definitely had a lot of times where I do that. And I think we also, just because we're humans and we have some personal ego, each and every one of us, or we have certain times where we just lose focus. Yeah. We can still step into those things regularly. So for me, it's a focus thing. Yes, I had plenty of times, and I have a lot of friends that can point back and say, remember that gig, man, where you were just blah, 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 this. And it's like, yeah, come on, man. That was 8 years ago. And they're still holding it over my head, man, remember that time? Remember that time when we played Shining Star and you just started doing blah, 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 and this thing on that one gig? Like, dude, that was 2006. You're still hanging over. It's like, yeah, man. Oh, man, whatever. So I have some friends that I've definitely had my times where I've done that. But I think the biggest thing for me was learning to recognize serving. It sounds like such a cliche Nashville thing, to serving the song, serving the moment.
It's people true though, man.
Say that, but yeah, whatever. I think just playing what's most appropriate and having the focus to understand, and the big picture thinking to understand what you're doing. Because a lot of time my guitar parts are boring if you just think about them as guitar parts. But if you think about them as the part of a whole, wow, it's really exciting, because I'm hitting these backbeat things on the guitar. And all I'm doing is hitting 2 and 4 and nothing in between. But what it's doing is it's giving this harmonic quality and this thickness to the snare backbeat, which really helps the whole thing. So if I just think it as, oh man, all I'm doing is playing this bar chord on beats 2 and 4, it's so boring. Yeah, then it's boring. But if you think about it as part of the big picture, then it's super exciting, you know? Like talk to a orchestral percussion player or like a timpani player who has to sit there and count 96 bars until he has his one timpani roll in the song, you know, and focus. That's how it's done. And there's that sort of thing with musicians in general where it's like, yeah, you know what? I just need you to play some pocket because it feels really good when you play the pocket. At the end of the phrase, give me a simple fill because all I need is a little momentum into the next section. And then if the drummer just thinks, well, man, I got all these licks and I got all this extra stuff and I can do all this stuff with my foot. It's like, well, yeah, that's fun if you're just playing by yourself. But there's a whole different dynamic when you're playing with a band, playing a song, playing on a record. There's all this big picture stuff where it's like, wow, yeah, maybe I shouldn't fill at the end of every section of every song. And we should figure out, okay, is it a keyboard thing or is it a guitar thing there? You know, we can't all be filling in this section because then it's a jumbled mess.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say it was a light switch. It was a gradual learning process to really understand. I was doing it before I really understood it because a lot of people were telling me, hey, you should do this, focus on this. And with a lot of it was like Michael Bland and Sonny Thompson in Dr. Mambo's combo where they were, that's where I cut my teeth and them just hollering at me, hey, quit doing this, and this is why. It's like, oh, or well, no, first it was quit doing this and this and this and this and this and this. Oh, okay, I just won't do that. And then I started to understand why. They would explain why. Yeah, that makes total sense. If there's a keyboard player playing 2 different keyboards with both hands, you know, and he's got all this thick stuff going on, I don't need to be playing a huge chord, thick voicing because we're starting to clash. Like all I need to do is this 2 or 3 note voicing, and all of a sudden it sounds cleaner and better. I don't need to play all these fills on this thing because there's a keyboard line that's happening there, and that's the focal point. So I think once you really understand the big picture and understand that sort of thing, then it's a lot easier to actually do it because you can understand why. Like, why should I stop at this stop sign? Well, because there's a lot of people going through here and there's some cross traffic. And at some point, you know, we don't want there to be an accident. We need to stop and make sure we take turns and that sort of thing. So if you kind of have that, of course I'm going to stop at a stop sign because that's what we do. And there's a reason why we do it. Similar thing with playing music and just like figuring out what your part is. And it can be a jam. It can be a thing that's fun and improvisational, but just understanding where to take your turn and where to give somebody else space is part of the journey.
What a great metaphor with the stop sign. And you know what? That's what makes good music. That's the difference when you watch a really good, tight band or just a good, tight group of musicians is everyone knows their place. And I know it seems sort of confined by me saying that, but it really isn't. And just like you, it took me a while to learn that too. I mean, I'm a drummer. We grew up playing tons and tons of fills, and it's hilarious. It's like a running joke amongst, professional pop drummers, at least, that, you spend all these years learning all these licks just so you can show up to the gig and just play, 2 and 4 and then just like a baka boom. That's like the fill. That's the go-to fill. But you know what? When you love it and you understand it, the song feels great though. Honestly, over these past couple years, I would much rather play pocket in a good set, in a good hour set than just solo for an hour. Cause it gets, to me at least, I'm not sure about other drummers, but to me, it's cool to do a fill and some really complicated shit. And it has its place. But when it comes to a band and it comes to songs and making music that people can listen to and dance to and feels right in that environment, obviously there's other environments, but in that specific environment, it's definitely great to have your place and own your place and shine when you have to. It just feels right.
Totally. 100%.
Absolutely. Man, Cory, I don't know what to say, man. I honestly am so grateful that you took the time out of your busy schedule, out of your busy Minnesota schedule to come hang out with me, drink some coffee and just talk about your career, man. You're fucking great, dude.
Thank you, man. That means a lot.
I'm a huge fan, man. And honestly, there's nothing more that I would like for you to say. I mean, you've said so many great things that I think that a lot of people wanted to know, and just that it's going to inspire a lot of guitarists and just musicians in general. But if you had to summarize everything, like if there was someone here, like you've said, you have plenty of people that have told you like, hey, what do I do next? I want to get on a tour or something. But if there was someone that really just wants to get to know their musical style better, understand who they are as a musician, and hopefully make a step forward in their career, like what would you advise them, or what would you tell them to be focusing on right now? Just as a quick recap.
Well, as far as musically and artistically, I would say the biggest thing is just find out what your sound is, find out who you are, what your voice is, and really ultimately what your vision and what you want to say is, and figure out how you can say that on either your instrument or through what you're trying to do. Yes, learn from the masters and learn to imitate the masters, but only enough so you have the vocabulary and understanding to be able to come up with your own thing. For me, that was a big thing. And then the next, as far as like how to get to the next level in your career or whatever, you know, professionally, my thing is always be the most prepared person in the room. You might not be the best musician in the room. You might think, wow, everybody else who's playing in this band is way better than me at their instrument than I am at mine. That's totally fine. But if you are the most prepared in the room, that's going to do so much as far as your professionalism and getting hired, and all of that just goes so far. Just, I know every tune, I know every note, I know the function of every part. Like, not only do I know the part, I know what it does. It's like, this guitar part does this thing, or this guitar part is this. But really the way that it functions is it helps lift the chorus and widen it. So if you understand, yes, the specific part, but also what the part does, energy-wise and rhythmically, how it fits into everything, I think that big picture thinking and preparedness is going to do wonders for your getting hired for more and more stuff.
Absolutely, man. Well said by the one, the only Cory Wong. And actually, as a funny little side note here, as we like wrap things up, before this interview happened, guys, actually, I was messaging someone else named Cory Wong. I added the wrong person on Skype, and we had like a quick 5-minute conversation. This person seemed very incredibly confused that I was trying to interview him. And so to you, other Cory, I apologize for the wrong messages. I know, Cory, you were just talking about how there's other people that have your email as well. I mean, they constantly get emails that are directed to you. But hey, that's what happens when you have a really great guitarist who has your same name. You're going to get lots of love from random places.
That's funny.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Cory Wong. I know that I definitely did. And I say this at the end of every episode. I'm always learning. It's one of the reasons why I love doing this podcast, because at the end of every interview, I come out inspired and ready to take on more challenges. And one thing that really stood out to me about Cory is that he didn't really start touring until he was 29, which is something that's relatively unheard of in our industry, especially in the pop sector. I bring this up because I get lots of messages from fans that, in one way or another express that they feel like their time is running out, that if they don't do something drastic today, that maybe their opportunity will be lost. And while I'm a big fan of taking drastic action, exactly what Cory said, we live in a time where the time doesn't matter as much anymore. The internet has changed that. You can be anywhere, you can be anything, you can be any age, and still find a way to be super successful with what you love to do. The key is to believe in yourself, to get up and just keep trying until you find that thing that sticks. And I promise you, if you do that, if you do something today, whether it's drastic or not, but you make a choice to do something for yourself, something you're passionate about, I guarantee you that you'll find success. So, as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, if you do enjoy this interview, subscribe to the podcast, because I promise you, I have lots of great interviews just like this one coming your way.